How's it going, everybody? And welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. I make music as Afro DJ Mac. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by Splice. Check out Splice Studio. It's kind of like Google Drive for your DAW. You automatically back up your files. You can share them with others. They can collaborate. You can see what they've done. It saves multiple versions. It's really awesome for collaborations and even releasing music so people can remix your stuff. Head over to splice.com/AfroDJMac-music. For today's episode, I want to kind of talk about some experiences I've had over the last few weeks in getting ready for a live performance that happened last weekend, August 11th, and some of the lessons I've learned, some of the problems I went through, some of the stress I had, and just thought it would be interesting for everyone because it's not exactly an entirely happy story, and I think those are sometimes really important to share, where this isn't one where everything went perfectly, though it didn't go quite as bad as I initially thought, and I'll tell you about it. So, I performed at the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo. This is a huge convention for video games, essentially. It's run by one of my best friends, and it's really grown over the last few years. I was there from the beginning doing sound, kind of just playing records of 8-bit video game music, playing theme songs from different games, kind of just DJing. But over the last few years, it's sort of developed into more of an event where there's actually musical guests. And this year we had some awesome guests. Shout out to a band called Console, who's like a big band, but they play old tunes from video games. There's Super Thrash Brothers, which was sort of like a metal video game band, which was really cool. They had a lot of energy, and they're awesome players, both bands. All the bands were awesome players. VGM Collective was sort of like a jazz take on some old video game music. And there were a few more. Destroyer did sort of like the synthwave stuff later that night. He played right after I did. I played at Saturday night. So this is a certain type of crowd. So what I wanted to do was create a whole new set of video game style music. So if you've been following me for any amount of time, you probably know I'm really into the chiptune thing, and not so much that it's like the kind of music I like to listen to or make necessarily, but I love some of the sounds. I really love the sound of like the old Nintendo. I think it's just beaten into my brain from playing these games for so long as a kid. I probably invested more time playing video games than I should ever admit. And the kind of subliminal beating that these little looping tunes give your brain, the sounds have a lot of nostalgia for me, so I really enjoy them. And over the last few years, I've created some Ableton Live products based on some of that stuff, which I think are great. And it's not even if you need like video game music, which isn't primarily how I use them. It's just if you want some cool sounds in your music, it's a nice flavor. These kind of old school lo-fi sounds can really add a nice charm to your music. And I think, anyone that grew up playing them will almost instantly kind of have a feeling of warmth and nostalgia when they hear them. I have this really awesome device called the MIDI NES, which I don't really think you can even get anymore. It's literally a Nintendo cartridge for your Nintendo Entertainment System that plugs into your cartridge. You plug it in like a regular game, but it has a MIDI cable that comes out of it. And there's some kind of software on the cartridge that is sort of like an interface to access the sound card on the Nintendo. And it allows you to get at 2 channels of pulse waves, which are basically square waves, rectangle waves. You have a triangle wave. You have a noise channel, and you've also got a sample channel. So there's like 5 sounds you can get at one given time. So if you think about like any of those old games you may have played, there can only be that many sounds at once happening. So there's a lot of limitation to the music, which is really cool and can be quite a challenge to write. And when you kind of understand how the systems worked and the sound cards worked and what those limitations were, it really makes some of the music that the composers came up with for some of these games all the more exciting and incredible, that they were able to do so much with so little. And I find that really inspiring. I know I've talked about it before. We have so many options these days, and we have no real limitations. And I think that is often the problem. We can show up to make music and not know where to start because we have so many different things to work with. I really believe in the idea of setting some limitations and giving yourself some boundaries so that you actually have somewhere to go. You don't just go into the universe without any direction. It's like getting in your car and not knowing where you're trying to go. You need a destination, and then you can figure out how you want to get there. But the limitations of some of the chiptune music is really cool. So I have the MIDI NES, and I use that to create my Super 8-bit pack for Ableton Live. I also had on loan a Synth Boy, which is a really awesome little docking station for a Game Boy, a Nintendo Game Boy, and it allowed you to access the sound card of that too. And it's very similar to the Nintendo, but a little bit different, maybe a little grittier. There's probably people out there that are way more into the subtleties. I know there's certain Game Boys that are sought after a little bit more, especially in like the LSDJ crowd, which LSDJ is actually like a little cartridge that is a tracker that you can actually program the Game Boy with, and it's pretty popular in the chiptunes community. I find it very difficult to write with it. It's very kind of mathematical almost, but it's impressive what people do with it. But yeah, those two devices I've used to create a whole collection of sounds that I've got that I love to throw into my music. But for this particular performance, I really wanted to write some more like authentic 8-bitty kind of music, not necessarily 100% authentic, but stuff that was like much more centered around like the video game sound, because that's the venue I was playing. Now, I've known about this show pretty much since last summer. I knew I was going to be playing, and in the last few years, I've sort of worked in some of my own music, kind of improvising video game songs, but kind of in the background. It was fun that way because it was nothing anyone was actually paying attention to. They were just going about their business, and I was sort of just making this video game music to fill in the background. But this year, I was going to actually do more of a performance. Now, here's maybe like one of the first lessons I have to give you to learn from me is to prepare early and get ready thoroughly well beforehand. Now, I've had, I don't know, I guess a lot going on where I didn't get to. A lot of procrastination is probably the real truth, but I really didn't get to making the songs until about a week or two before the show was to begin. I did a little bit of prep, though, I should say. I last year released an Ableton Live template called CoinOp, which is designed for creating authentic 8-bit music, and I knew I was going to build my live set off of that. I wound up kind of creating a hybrid of this CoinOp template with my regular live performance template that has vocals and some effects that I like to add in while I'm playing live. So although I didn't prepare early enough, I did sort of have a little bit of a foundation ready to go. And that definitely saved me tremendously because I did not start soon enough. I waited way too long, way too long. And I think when you're going to play live, it's so important to know your setup, to know your controllers, to know what everything does, to be really comfortable with that. I didn't exactly have that this time because I was doing something different. I didn't quite have it down. By the time I actually got to play, I mean, it was still very new and fresh to me. So the first bit of advice is really make sure you're prepared. And I really don't recommend like changing anything in your performance setup like the day before. That's just too soon. I really think you need to think about, if you're doing live electronic music, your setup of controllers, you have to think of it like an instrument. And I like that way of thinking about it because it's more something you play, right? It's not just like pressing a button and music comes on. You're performing, you're using your setup as an instrument, and it's a customized instrument. It'd be almost like inventing the guitar every time you had to go out and play a show. I mean, we don't do that. We know the guitar, we're familiar with it, and we play it. But when you're making your live performance setup, you have to sort of invent the instrument. So you really need to be prepared and ready and understand it inside and out. Again, just to use like the guitar metaphor, you don't want to have no idea where the notes are or where to pluck the strings or something like that before you go out to play. So it's so important to prepare. And I really did not do that. But like I said, I did sort of have something I was relatively familiar with, ready to go. But the other thing is, I wanted to write all new music. So I did not know the songs. And what I wound up doing is writing a lot of songs, ideas really. I use Ableton's live session view. I create a bunch of clips and I wound up writing a bunch of ideas for songs. Now, I had melodies, I'd been kind of jamming on them. I had ideas for them, but I really did not have complete songs. A lot of lyrics were improvised. Maybe there was a couple lines I wanted to say, but a lot of it was improvised. Definitely the arrangements were worked out on the fly. I do not recommend the way I approach this, believe me. And what wound up happening is when I got to the show, the bottom line is I just didn't feel very comfortable. I did not have it down. I did not have the confidence in it. I was nervous. I was a little scared. I was afraid I would forget how to do things. And it's almost like not even a matter of forgetting. I didn't have it worked out yet. So I didn't know if I was going to do it well. In my rehearsals, there were times where it went pretty well and I felt really good. And there were other times where I felt like I had no direction. I didn't know where I was going with everything. So the idea for the songs were super, super loose. And this really came out in my performance. This unsettled feeling, this nervousness really came out in myself, the way I felt while performing. And I think that's a terrible feeling. It really was like not something I enjoyed. I can't really say that I had a lot of fun while I was performing because these emotions were really plaguing me. It's kind of like a stage fright. And I think maybe a lot of times stage fright does happen because you're not prepared enough, you're not ready enough. That's certainly the case this time because I usually feel pretty good when I go out there because I'm ready, I'm prepared. Not so much this time. So I found that my sort of like ability to interact with the audience was definitely hampered because I really couldn't think about it because I had to pay so much attention to what I was actually doing and be really aware that what I was doing was going to sound okay. And it led to that really uncomfortable feeling that I'm kind of talking about now. I'm sure you've probably seen a performance by artists that just didn't feel very passionate, or maybe like they were phoning it in. It was the routine. It was the 900th day of the tour, or maybe who knows what it is, right? But I'm sure you've seen that where an artist just wasn't into what they were doing. And it could be, I guess, for a lot of reasons. For me, it was like the preparation thing and my own kind of my nervousness in my head. I was so in my head for this performance. I think it was Lou Reed that said this. If it wasn't, I don't know who said it, but I thought it was Lou Reed. And it really stuck with me. He was talking about performing live, and he said, enthusiasm is contagious. And I've always really tried to bring that when I play. I've tried to bring a lot of energy because I know that, like, we feed off of that. And when you're the guy with the microphone and the big speakers, you command a lot of attention. So your vibe is going to spread across the audience. So it's really like a precious thing. And I think a power that requires a lot of responsibility and a lot of care. Unfortunately for this performance, I was very in my head and had a hard time conveying excitement about what I was doing because I wasn't so excited about what I was doing. I was nervous about what I was doing. I wasn't going out there with the attitude of like, all right, we're going to have a great time and I'm going to do some cool stuff that I'm really enjoying and I think you're going to have a lot of fun listening to. It wasn't my attitude. My attitude was more like, okay, I'm not really sure how this is going to turn out. It might be bad. I hope you guys don't hate it. That was sort of my attitude. I didn't say that, but that was sort of how I felt. And I really don't think that's a great way to go out there. And this was a lack of preparation thing on my part. Now, on top of this, I had some experiments. I mean, the whole entire performance was an experiment, really, since everything was new and fresh and hardly even The ink wasn't even dry, and some of the ink wasn't even written yet. Still isn't. But it was a bit of an experiment with what I did with my vocals. I wanted to try this kind of like stuck in a video game sound where my voice was bit crushed. I used a bit crush. I used Redux inside of Live, and I crushed my voice. I also used Isotope Nectar for its auto tune, and not so much. I mean, the pitch is there, but the main thing I wanted to get out of it was the formant shift. It gives like this kind of low guy talking voice, sort of like this. This really deep, heavy voice, and I just thought it would be kind of cool to have this like robotic, trapped in a video game voice. Of course, I was worried about like feedback and stuff, but I managed to create a set of a set of audio effects that kind of prevented that. So essentially what I did is I put a pretty strong gate on my microphone so that it would really only pick up when I'm singing right on the mic and kind of loud. So my music wasn't getting picked up on the mic. I then did some EQing, some compressing. I put another gate on it, again, just to sort of like double safety net type of thing. And then I ran it through all of the effects. And after that, I also put another gate. So I was really concerned with feeding back. And I didn't really have that problem, which was cool. It worked out well. It was a lot of gates during like every stage of the audio signal, really. And it helped prevent a lot of the noise coming through the mic, which is what gives you the feedback. So the thing, though, was it's a slightly harsh sound. It's a bit crush, and it's on your voice. And I was a little worried that my voice would be offensive to the ears in that it'd be like piercing, that it might like kind of hurt. I mean, I'm playing very loud, so you got to be aware of those types of things when certain frequencies jump out. I don't think it was too bad. I put a low pass filter on the vocals to kind of avoid that and to cut out a little bit of the harshness, but it was another concern I had. So every time I sang too, I felt like a little nervous and scared it was going to like blow something up and make people want to run out of the room. These are not good feelings to have when you're going out to entertain a crowd. Definitely not a good way to do it. The funny thing about this type of performance, though, just to set the stage a little bit, there is no stage to begin with. It's on the ground, which I tend to like. I like being amongst the people. But mostly, there were a lot of TVs set up with a lot of different video games, and it was mostly people playing video games. So it's almost funny that I'm so concerned about the performance because a lot of it is background music while people do other things. But nonetheless, that is how I felt. And it's due to a lack of preparation. It would have been really smart of me to maybe get to an open mic night to test it out, to obviously have more time to rehearse it and write the songs a little more concretely. But that's not what I did. And this is a major lesson I want to impart to you because it's a really kind of terrifying feeling, when you're up there and this could go really bad. Now, the funny thing is, I did record it, and I'm going to put that recording at the end of this so you can kind of understand what I'm talking about. I'm just going to put the whole live performance. It's about a half hour long. I'll just let you hear it. Normally, I wouldn't put this out, but I think it might help serve the lesson, and you can decide if it came out good or bad or not. But the funny thing to me is I left, when I was done playing, I didn't feel great. I just, was uncomfortable with it. And all of that stuff inside created my perception of the event that was really awkward, anxious, and self-conscious. It was nice when I finished that I did have some people come up and say they enjoyed the show. I have friends there. They were happy. They said they liked it too. I mean, I don't know. People say that to be nice sometimes, and that's what I was thinking. But the next day, I bounced out my session, and I listened to it on the ride back over for the second day of this Long Island Retro Gaming Expo. And I was quite surprised that I enjoyed the performance a lot more than I thought I would. It came out a lot better than I thought it had. So, because I had all these negative feelings and this worry inside of me, my perception of the performance was really bad. I thought it was, I felt embarrassed almost. That's how it was, where I just was like, oh man, I could do so much better than this. And I just wasn't ready. And I just missed a cool opportunity to play some music. But upon listening back, I was pretty happy with it, considering my expectations were nothing, basically. I was pretty happy with what happened. And as a result, it kind of motivated me to keep working on these tracks because I do think there's a lot of cool ideas. I think there's a lot of nice melodies and there's some interesting song ideas that I want to flesh out a little more and put into maybe some sort of like 8-bit style EP. And I think it'd be a nice thing to bust out when it's appropriate, that type of crowd, these types of events maybe. Um, but, you know, I didn't have these feelings until later when I was in a different mindset and I was feeling different the next morning. And when I listened back, I was pretty happy with the sound. There's definitely mistakes. I don't even know if I can call them mistakes, honestly, because I didn't even have an intention. So there's definitely things I could have done better, things that could have worked out nicer. But on the whole, I think the core of the songs came out and I sort of came up with ideas as I was going. So I think I developed the songs quite a bit during the performance and laid the foundation for some nice songs that I want to pursue. So the funny thing about this is the lack of preparation is obviously like the lesson I'm talking about, don't have that lack of preparation. But, I could have pulled out. I could have not done it. I could have said, no, I'm not going to play. No, I'm not ready. There's a problem. I could have lied. I could have made, there's a lot of ways you can get out of a performance. I could have done that, but I didn't. And because I didn't, I went through it and sort of, in a way, took my medicine and to say that, this is the preparation level I came with, and now I have to deal with that and accept it. But while doing that, it helped advance my ideas. It helped put me through it. In fact, the whole event really forced me to write these songs, to write these ideas down and to make some music and try something different, experiment a little bit, and try some new things with the performances I'm doing, with the songs I'm writing. And that is super valuable. And even if what transpired was terrible, and even if I listened back the next morning and thought it was awful, I still made some progress. Luckily, in looking back, it's actually much better than I expected it would be, which is really cool. And that's an inspiring thing, but it also really speaks to this idea of your own mind state while you're playing. And I guess this really applies to anything, not just performance, right? But your own mind state, your own mental place that you are in when you're doing something really colors how whatever it is you're doing turns out. I remember hearing a little study, had to do with body language actually, where there was a speaker that gave two different speeches. And during the first speech, they asked the audience to adopt this sort of like open body language. And the idea is like your arms, your body's open, you're accepting. And when you have that sort of posture, you tend to be more accepting of what's going on in front of you. You tend to be more friendly and open, literally. It's like the body and the mind connect that way. So they instructed the second audience to fold their arms and have this very closed body language. And the result was that the first group with the open body language liked the speech better. They understood more of it. They retained more of it. And they enjoyed the speaker more so than the second group, which saw the exact same speech. They were more critical of the speaker themselves. They retained less information and they enjoyed the experience less because they were almost like set up not to enjoy it, which is really fascinating to me. That, for one, I mean, just to talk about body language for a second, our body language reflects how we feel, but it also goes both ways. If we adopt a certain body language, we start to feel that way too. So You can try it out if you find yourself in a situation. Close off your body language, fold your arms, turn away from the person, and you will enjoy that conversation less. On the other hand, open your body language, turn towards the person, look them in the eye. You will tend to enjoy the conversation more. It's a two-way street, which is very interesting. And that's the big lesson I got here, is that your mindset really colors your experience. And because I went into this show with this nervousness, with this anxiety, with this lack of preparedness and this worry about it, I felt it went really bad. Because in my head, all I was saying was like, oh no, I'm going to screw this up. Oh no, this is going to turn out terrible. And how much fun can you have doing anything if that's what you're thinking the whole time? And it really ruined the experience of the show. I did not enjoy playing that much. I enjoy it now looking back, because I listened back, I learned some important lessons, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. And now I'm happy I did it, and I got something out of it. I learned. And another important lesson that we need to just remember is even our failures can be the greatest teachers. So even if this show was terrible on a lot of levels, I do think it was. But there's still something positive to gain out of this, something we can learn. There's some forward progress we can make. And sometimes forward progress requires taking a couple steps back. Well, having said all that, I want you to maybe think about that when you're doing something, when you're playing your music. What is your mindset? What's going through your head? Be aware of it. Try to just understand why that's happening. For me, it was preparation. I wasn't there with my preparation. Nothing to do with the actual turn of events. I know my mindset would have been better had I done the preparation and been ready. So it's a good lesson too. If I want to get into that mindset next time, I need to be prepared. I need to have this thing down. What I'll do now is I will put on the performance and let you hear it for yourself. Like I said, it's about a half an hour. I think I go through about like 7 or 8 songs or song ideas, if you want to call them that. And I'll let you be the judge. You can leave me a comment or tweet me at AphroditeMac or something and let me know what you think. I am putting myself out there a little bit. I wouldn't normally release this, but I do think it's interesting for the point that I'm trying to make. And I think it's sometimes good to show your vulnerabilities and your flaws and your problems. And for me, even just talking through it on this podcast has helped me just have a better understanding and feel a little bit better about it. So without any further ado, here is my performance at the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo. Thanks so much for listening. And if you're enjoying the podcast, let us know on iTunes or Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Send me an email or whatever you want. I love the feedback and I'm really enjoying it. So I hope you enjoy this performance. Take care.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Retro and Skill. My name's AphroditeMac. Let's do it. I've got no problem still.
Oh yeah.
What was the fire that you did? What was the fire we made? My body's on the fritz of I wanna Oh no, this thing gone by so fast. What you think about? Are you sure you wanna know? All situations rolls away again. My fifth time is over again. Your best time is here, my friend. Wait for it now. It's mine and I make me. Oh, you were miles away. Let's see if anything did it. I was the name. Oh, I wanna find you, but I can't see. I wanna call it up, honey. I wanna be. I wanna find it all, honey, but I can't believe I see the best in you, honey. Oh, damn, please. Why would I fight it all today?
Thank you.
Welcome to your doom. Welcome to your welcome to your doom. Welcome to your doom.